17. Authority, Justice, and Men. God, in His law, makes clear the untrustworthiness of man. Corroboration of evidence is necessary for conviction. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 6 and 7. This law is very strongly stressed. Numbers chapter 35, verse 30, Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15, applies this test to any crime. The New Testament is also emphatic on this point. Matthew chapter 18, verse 16, John chapter 8, verse 17, 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 19, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 28. No man, however important, can, by his testimony, convict another unless his testimony is clearly confirmed. In the sphere of authority, the same distrust of an uncorroborated authority is stressed. There was a system of appeals from the local elder to one above him, on up to Moses, and, later, the governing judge or the king. Exodus chapter 18, verses 21 to 23, Numbers chapter 11, verses 16 and 17, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 12 to 17. This was not all. In all difficult cases, there were questions about the proper application of God's law. 3 men or more had to sit in court to adjudicate the case. If there arise a matter too hard for thee in judgment, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, and between stroke and stroke, being matters of controversy within thy gates, then shalt thou arise, and get thee up into the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt come unto the priest, the Levites, and unto the judge that shall be in those days, and inquire, and they shall show thee the sentence of judgments. And thou shalt do according to the sentence, which they of that place which the Lord shall choose shall show thee, and thou shalt observe to do according to all that they inform thee. According to the sentence of the law which they shall teach thee, and according to the judgments which they shall tell thee, thou shalt do. Thou shalt not decline from the sentence which they shall show thee to the right hand, nor to the left. And the man that will do presumptuously, and will not hearken unto the priest that standeth to minister there before the Lord thy God, or unto the judge, even that man shall die. And thou shalt put away the evil from Israel. And all the people shall hear, and do no more presumptuously. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 8 to 13. This law is the continuation of Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 18 to 20, which speaks of the courts of law. In chapter 17, verse 8, certain types of cases are specified as typical problem cases for such an appeal to the higher court of Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 8 to 13. Between blood and blood means a decision as to whether a crime is manslaughter or premeditated murder. Between plea and stroke, Exodus chapter 22, verses 1 to 15, refers mainly to matters of theft, embezzlement and restitution, and also personal injury. Exodus chapter 21, verses 18 to 34. The decisions of this Supreme Court are final, and failure to obey is punished by death. This appellate court must include priests, Levites, and judges. The Levites are instructors, educators, and God's law is basic to true education. Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 10. According to Ezekiel chapter 44, verses 15, 23, and 24, the priests have a like function. Together with the Levites, they are to function as a part of the court, to set forth the laws of God which apply to the case at hand. Compare Malachi chapter 2, verse 7. A modern term for this dilution of authority on the human level is checks and balances. However, The checks and balances provided by God's law are more thorough than those of the US Constitution. Not only is there a system of appeals, but there is also the fact that God's law is applied to the particulars of the case. The judges are assumed to be covenant men. All the same, theological experts in God's law must be in the court, presiding together with the civil judges. In the history of the application of Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 8 to 13 in Israel, it is worthy of note that disobedience to the ruling of the religious leaders was very serious. In fact, it was later ruled that disobedience to the words of the scribes was more serious than disobedience to the words of the Torah. In time, Psalm 119, verse 126, which declares, "It is time for thee, Lord, to work, for they have made void thy law," was taken to mean, it is time to do something for the Lord, so make void the Torah. The plain meaning of God's law was regularly set aside because the Sanhedrin came to maintain that circumstances could require correcting or altering God's law. At the same time, as Horowitz noted, it was held that God's law, the Torah, was unchangeable, and that there could be no addition or subtraction from it. This development not only invoked the wrath of Jesus Christ, but constituted the heart of Phariseeism. It also pinpoints the fallibility of human authorities. We have repeatedly had like developments in history, as witness many decisions of the US Supreme Court. Thus, God, in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 8 to 13, does not give us an infallible means of preventing injustice. What we get is a dilution of human authority in order to protect the judicial process. We have, thus, a first conclusion that must be faced, namely, that not even a God-provided law can prevent injustice. On the human level, there is no infallible justice. Man, being a sinner, perverts the best possible law structure to suit his purposes. The Sanhedrin took the provision of God's law and turned it upside down, so that man's word was given priority over God's word. The rationale was that men were on the scene, knew more, and were more flexible. The yardstick of law was made into rubber, and a rubber yardstick is no valid measure at all. Having said this, however, we must add, second, that the history of Israel is without equal in antiquity. Despite the dereliction, periodically, and then finally, of the Sanhedrin, Israel provided a longer history of justice than any other nation of antiquity. In a sea of evil, it was still an asylum of justice. The fact of God's law provided a major break against sin. The Sanhedrin meeting which condemned Jesus apparently had a majority present, but it was an illegal session. However, pragmatism had for some time replaced legality. All the same, when the apostles were brought before these authorities, Gamaliel represented a temper of judicious restraint and legality. Acts chapter 5, verses 33 to 40. Thus, the fact of an infallible standard, God's law, set Israel apart and gave it a history of some justice as against the constant tyrannies of pagan states. Third, the fact of the law meant, as we have seen, a form of checks and balances. Priests, Levites, and civil judges had to be a part of the appellate court, so that the perspective of God's law could be maximized. There was, however, much more. Over the centuries, the prophets served as a major check. By proclaiming God's law and indicting transgressors thereof, both in and out of power and authority, the prophets required the people to remember the priority of justice under God's law. The defense of the covenant and the law of the covenant was the prophetic task. Wherever the prophetic calling is operative, there too the people will resist every violation of God's justice. However, where priests and prophets go astray, there too will the people. Isaiah chapter 28, verses 7 and 8 give us an indictment of false priests and prophets alike. But they also have erred through wine, and through strong drink are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up of wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. For all tables are full of vomit and filthiness, so that there is no place clean. The very people who should lead the nation in righteousness or justice are filthy pigs. The tables, which should be places to eat to keep strong in God's service, are tables of filth. Jeremiah makes a like indictment. Both prophet and priest are profane. Instead of justice, they manifest sin in God's very house. Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 11. Instead of leading the people in terms of God's law word, these false leaders are giving the people what they want. Micah gives us a telling description of this. If a man walking in the Spirit in falsehood do lie, saying, I will prophesy unto thee of wine and of strong drink, he shall even be the prophet of this people. Micah chapter 2, verse 11. The heads thereof judge for reward, and the priests thereof teach for hire, and the prophets thereof divine for money. Yet will they lean upon the Lord and say, Is not the Lord among us? None evil can come upon us. Micah chapter 3, verse 11. The leaders are mercenary, and they put their advancement above God's justice. At the same time, they invoke God's name and the covenants as their security from evil. However, such evil authorities flourish because the people want them. God told Isaiah that this is a rebellious people, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord, which say to the seers, See not, and to the prophets, Prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits. Isaiah chapter 30, verses 9 to 10. In brief, God says that the people will get the kind of leaders they want. They will demand and only approve of men who speak smooth things and prophesy and promise lies. In fact, says Micah chapter 2, verse 11, if an evil-spirited man declares that salvation lies in drunkenness, he shall even be the prophet of this people. The authority and leadership people demand is in conformity to their character. The authority exercised by our presidents reflects the weaknesses of American character, and the same is true of every country in the world. A people will be ruled by an authority which conforms to their faith and character. Attempts at legislative and judicial reform without a like reform of the faith of the people are futile. God's appellate court system is not designed to eliminate sin. Rather, it offers justice to a people who want justice. The whole world today is plagued with injustice because people do not want justice, except where it will serve their interests. People may agree that justice is good, but they are more comfortable without it. People are ready enough to condemn debt and to admit the personal and social evils of long-term debt, but they will still justify their long-term borrowing. At every point, men in effect say, Let the world be good, so that I might be more free and secure in my sin and selfishness. If people today truly wanted justice, we would have it. If they wanted a godly president, we would have one. All over the world, however, we see only the evil leaders as strong ones. Apparently, what men least desire is a just social order, because it requires that they first of all be just. God's law provides true justice and authority for those peoples who want it.